Azin, and Bahar. Where are you?
In case you couldn't hear, that was Lara Wolf and Bahar Beihaghi here with us. We are excited to
Lots
have
of
them.
fans, yeah. Can you believe it?
Amazing. Thank you all so much for this amazing film. I was looking it up before, and it's been translated into 32 languages. This is possibly one of the. How many people here have read the book? Wow. Okay. So no spoilers for you. Okay. That is a challenge. Taking something that's so well recognized and trying to bring that to screen.
Yeah.
How did you approach that?
As something easy. It's the only way to do it. Well, I read the book. I think the essence is that I read the book many years ago, and I fell in love with it. And I felt this was after The Syrian Bride and Lemon Tree, and I felt this could be my next film. And as I told you before, I met Azar, and we started working on the script. It took a long time. Then I got involved very quickly with the mission of the Human Resources Manager. And then I suddenly found myself making something like, I think, 4 films within 4 years, ending with Dancing Arabs, or Borrowed Identity, as it was called here. Shelter, Spider and the Web. So I was really busy along those years, and yet this was being developed. We had a script already. I rewrote it. Tried again. Tried the usual suspects for me, which were especially in Germany and France, and somehow I couldn't get it off the ground. And yet I remained a believer, because I really felt this story is, it's not only because it did so well, it's just a powerful story with powerful, amazing women, also interesting men, I think. And I just stuck with it, and I think that was nothing could stop me eventually. And I guess it's true for every movie, but here it was really carrying the weight of this, both the fact that it demanded to be made, and yet, as I said, I kept it simple from my point of view. I tried to treat the film as if nobody read the book, nobody knows anything, nobody knows who Nabokov is, Tarkovsky. Who is that? I really tried to keep it on a way that it would remain communicative to a wide audience, as wide as possible.
And I'm gonna let the ladies start with this next question, because I feel, of course, with an Israeli director, I didn't notice too many Israeli elements in this, but you probably
but editor. My son wrote the music. Yeah. And
you used to work at the JCC, by the way.
Yes, he studied jazz here in New York. So. Yeah. No, I think that the people in the post-production were really mine, the Israelis, and the rest are Italians, actually. So it's and a French DOP. So interesting combination.
But coming also to such a famous book, now being directed with, this is not a Persian woman here directing it. How did you feel coming into this project, and was there any trepidation?
For me, it was very special, because I had read the book when I was maybe, 16, 17 years old. And I remember feeling a certain thing, reading it. And then it curled back around in form of as an audition years later. And I couldn't believe what I had in front of me. And I just knew I had to be part of it. He could have put me in there as a tree. I didn't care. I needed to be in there. And in fact, he tried me out in, I think we all tried a lot of parts.
Yeah.
But, ultimately, it doesn't really matter who makes this film. It doesn't matter. As long as the heart is in the right place and the mind is in the right place, it doesn't matter. It's a woman or a man, Israeli, Irani, I think we did good here.
We're all brothers and sisters, finally,
Bahar, how about you?
I remember in our first Zoom meeting that we had, after I did my audition one more time, we had a little chat afterwards, and Eran asked me, if you end up in my movie, is that going to be a problem for you? And I said, as long as we're telling a heartfelt story, I don't see any problem in that. And I still stand true by it. I think the sensitivity that Eran had to the text, to the story of each of these women, and the way he was so collaborative on set about our choices for our characters, I would say he was the best storyteller that could tell the story.
Amazing. Glad we got that out of the way. Let's move.
Yeah.
Let's move into
Too
this
easy.
beautiful film. The film. First of all, how did you go about recreating? I take it you have not been to Iran or to Tehran
I
specifically.
cannot
or you
comment
can't
on
answer
that.
that question. How did you go about recreating Tehran? Where did you shoot it? What were kind of the challenges in that process?
If you allow me just 1 second before that, I want to talk about the casting process, which took me almost 2 years, because I was trying out everybody for every role, but also because I insisted to myself, after Zoom meetings initially, I really insisted on traveling and meeting these actresses and actors, almost all of them. So it meant, LA, New York, London, Paris, Berlin, everywhere. It was very important to me because I made one major decision. I will cast only Iranians. Of course, it's all Iranian exiles. And of course, it's Iranians of different levels, those who were, I think most of them, if not all of them, were born in Iran, but left at various stages of their life. Golshift and Zar and Mina, Nasreen, left in their mid-20s, following various issues. Maybe we'll talk about it later. Others, left at an earlier age. Some left as kids. Some grew up in Europe or elsewhere. But in essence, this cast, I really tried to avoid doing what a lot of Hollywood films were, to take Israelis to play Palestinians and vice versa. No, it will be all Iranians, and I'm very proud of that. Recreating Tehran. Well, after I failed to raise money in so many places, I was actually in Rome to receive some kind of lifetime achievement, which I refused to actually take. But okay, I flew in, and for 36 hours, and there was a small panel about co-productions, and I was talking, and I actually said, it's interesting. On my next film, I think, will be about Iran, and obviously Iran will not be a partner to it. And that was that, more or less. And then 2 Italian producers came to me and sort of said, wow, we love this book. It's very popular here. We love your movies. Most of my movies did well in Italy. And if you shoot here, we can bring a lot of money to the production. Shoot here made no sense. I met 3 production designers who said, I'm totally crazy. I mean, forget it. You can't do Tehran in Rome, And I said, well, it's not about the Colosseum. It's about, Rome, a different Rome. And actually, the series Tehran, which I assume many of you saw, was being shot in Athens at that time. So I actually flew to Athens just to make sure, came back to Rome feeling Rome is better than Athens. I hope there's no issue with that. And, sorry, somebody Greek here? And, well, I think my approach was, I did 2 things, a lot of research. And when I do research, I become obsessed, and I drive everybody crazy with details. And yet I trusted my intuition. When I went to see Rome University, which is the biggest university in Europe, I walked in, and I just felt this is the Tehran University. I had no reason to think that except for some black and white images, but that was what I felt, and I said, we're going to shoot here. 2 months later, I brought in my Iranian advisor. He was in Paris. He came. I really felt very nervous that he's going to trash all our locations, but he actually walked into university and started crying. And he said, wow, you're bringing me back to my university days in Tehran. And I felt, okay, that's the moment I felt I can trust my instincts. I can trust my advisors, of course. And at the end, it's not about, are there floors like this in Tehran or not? It's about, does it feel right? And I think today, after many screenings of this film, I think one point I can say for sure is that it's very authentic.
Bahar, how do you feel about that? Did he capture in any way as someone representing here? Did he capture? Do you think? Do you find there are things that that stand out as not being Persian?
I would say the day that we were shooting the University of Tehran scenes, we left from the trailer, and when they dropped us in front of that Ferdowsi statue, I was just shocked. I was like, oh, there is this little buffet probably right behind there where we would get omelets with my friends. So I really trusted his instincts, and everything was very well planned. And at the same time, I was also not born at that time. So I also had to do research to make sure that my behavior, the way I'm touching my scarf and everything is also relevant to the time. So I really felt right about a lot of the places that I was in.
Lara, how about for you?
I would say I wasn't raised in Iran, but my mom made sure she took me there every year. So every year I spent a little bit of time in Iran, and I got a certain sense of it. I got a sense how it smells, how it looks, the colors, the sounds, and somehow we were in this magical world. And also Rome, believe it or not, there's a lot of Iranians there, and at some point I was like, wait, is everyone Iranian? I heard Farsi everywhere suddenly. It was interesting.
Jews and Iranians, that's the way it
Yes.
works everywhere.
And for me, these memories somehow just came alive, and it was actually very beautiful and nostalgic, and it made me sad and happy at the same time. That's the only way I can answer it. Yeah.
A quick story.
Please.
On my I think more or less my first week in Rome, I did a really long preparation, quite unusual. I told my line producer, who was Sicilian, he always insisted I'm Sicilian, not Italian, which was very good for me. And I said, let's find some Iranian restaurants here in Rome. It's always good to go to a restaurant. You find, you see people, you can probably meet some people who come to eat there, maybe some future extras, stuff like that. And we came to this tiny place. And there was a guy, and I came in. He seemed like the owner. I said, I'm from Israel. Is that okay? He said, welcome, my brother. And we started talking, and I told him about the book, and he never heard of it. And who's in the movie? And I said, Gol Shifte Farahani. And he said, oh, my God, we went to music academy together in Tehran. Turned out he has two brothers, and there are actually three performers playing all over Europe, but they have a restaurant, for safety. And I think all these girls actually danced on the tables there at some point, right? Late in the shoot. So, it was immediately, even in Rome, I felt I could find, I can't say my people, but, my people for this film. Because they were there, and they were just waiting for us. And even when in the scenes where you see, let's say the big demonstration outside the university, in front of the faculty, it's, of course, it's a mixture of people, extras, but at least a third are Iranians. So it meant that the whole dynamic, or the whole physical side of it, and the whole chant, all the chants and everything came from a really authentic place. And I think that was true for all the scenes. And luckily, of course, Italians, as Israelis, essentially we look like Iranians and they look like us. It's really just a matter of finding the right people for the right part in this case.
I do have a favorite scene.
Okay.
The Jane Austen scene, the dancing scene. I'll tell you why I like that scene. I know it's a little cheesy, I'm sorry. But what I like about it is that sometimes in movies you see a scene that's created in order to create a bond between a group. While this scene itself is actually an educational moment, it's not just done, just to create. They're not just having a dance party.
No.
It's actually an educational moment that I think underlines some of the subtext of the entire mission of the book and the film, in some ways, and spells that out very nicely, and yet creates this beautiful moment of bonding. Can we talk a little bit about the creation of that scene and the work on that scene?
Well, of course, there were a lot of details in terms. You need a choreographer, you need somebody who understands how to do this in terms of the dance, and followed by the Persian dance also. And But and I saw, I think, maybe at least 20 times the Pride and Prejudice version with Keira Knightley, I think. You know, just to get a sense. But and there's also a beautiful dance scene there, I have to say. Well, you know, I think the answer comes from a different place for me because me and my cinematographer, Helen, who's this really amazing cinematographer, I think, we made one main decision is that we are part of the story. We're not looking at it, we're not observing it, we are part of it. So we're always inside. And I think if you look back at the film, you'll see that the camera is always close to these ladies. It's always within the event. And the same thing was with the dance, you know, so it's not terribly stylized in terms of my work and the camera work. And yet, it's real. It's just, you know, you feel that these girls are awkward with the dance, and yet they want to experiment. It shows, I agree with you, I'm not sure it's my favorite scene, but I agree that it has all the elements of the story. It's in terms of, and also, you know, it comes at a very particular moment. This lady was just beaten up by her husband. It carries a lot of emotion and it's possibly maybe a turning point, although we don't know that yet. I think it took 2 days to shoot, which is, for this kind of film, it's a lot, because, you know, how can you spend 2 days on one scene? But we allowed ourselves to do it, and well, there's a lot of technique, but I'm not going to go into that because, you know, I always had a second camera in this film, which is unusual for me because I grew up with professors who told me there's only one position for a camera. All the rest is a compromise, which is true. And yet, I don't know, I felt that
it's also film was expensive. Now it's, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to say, just again, if it's of interest to any cineasts here, I had a third camera, but it was a hidden one. Because I told the guy, I never want to see you. And I really never saw him. And he brought in all these beautiful, extreme close-ups and kind of moments that you can never have time to shoot, but we had them. And in the dance, it was, you know, you see a foot stepping into the frame without shoes. It's one of those kind of moments. It's, yeah.
It was very effective.
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, it's really, I was looking today, you know, there's always this debate, do I go to the green room or do I stay here? But I stayed. And and I always, you know, discover the things I want to change, but that's okay. But I think this film was about giving space to all these characters, you know, and giving, you know, how, even though it's structured around Azar as a central character who kind of drives the story, and yet all these girls who come into her life, in and out of her life, are so much a reflection of her, and yet they represent themselves, and of course represent much beyond that. I don't want to get into that. So it was really about, what am I answering now? I'm not sure.
We started with Jane Austen, but I think.
Yeah. It's no, I was just thinking about really the
things you would change.
yeah. No, you know, the real challenges are these kind of scenes. The real challenges are seen in the classroom, which seems, you know, simple, like, you know, students sitting and talking, but you have the men on the side who are kind of on the negative side and yet intelligent. It was really important for me I kept reminding my male cast, the students especially, that, hey, you know, you chose this class. You chose to study English literature. Of course, you can tell your professor we don't want to study Lolita because it's against our, you know, our beliefs, but still you are there. And that means something. That's why I think all the men here, even the Islamists, are portrayed in a way that you can, you know, you can believe them and you can even respect them to a certain degree. Not to mention, of course, the husband and the so-called magician. It's never mentioned in the movie that he's the magician, but, you know, Azar's mentor. Yeah.
All right, I want to leave some time for questions from the audience. I'm just going to ask one more important question. This is to the three of you. Why, for you, is it important to tell this story now? This is a story, the book's been out there. The story, in some ways, has been told. Why now is it important for an audience to see this movie?
You'll know next week, no? So, I think. Well, you know, it's from the beginning. It's a timeless story, which I guess in many occasions you say, "Oh, wow, this is a timeless story. It's always relevant." But in this case, it's really true. It's always relevant. And you know, it's a story about Tehran in the 80s and 90s, and yet I feel it's about everywhere, anytime, in the past, in the present, in the future. It's very sad to say this, and I have to say that the movie makes me sad every time. It's very emotional in that sense, and yet, you know, there is hope here, and then the question about hope is very complex because do you have to leave your country in order to move forward in your life? Big question. So I think the answer is in the question in a way because it is timeless, it is relevant, and I think it applies to almost every people in the world. Although I have to tell you one short thing. I swear it's going to be short. 5 years ago, I met an American producer in Los Angeles, and I was telling him, you know, this is about freedom. It's about oppression of women everywhere, even here in America. And he said, "What do you mean? There's no oppression of women here." And I said, "Well, you know," he says, "Shirley," he calls the secretary. "Shirley, come here."
Quickly.
Walks in, quickly, of course. "Shirley, do you feel oppressed?" Now, I see her looking at him, worrying about her job, looking at me, and she says, "Well, actually, yes, sometimes." "Ah, shut up. Get out." So, you know, I knew I was not going to get money from this guy, but seriously speaking, you know, it's about, I think very much this movie is about internal oppression and and the quest, you know, for freedom and the fact that you have to remain, you have to resist, and you have to be resilient, and yet you take a beating almost all the time, whoever you are, wherever you are. And that's why it's important to tell the story over and over again.
Thank you. Thank you. Lara, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I think, you know, with what's going on in Iran, and just seeing how the women are fighting and the immense courage that they bring out to stand there and go against these awful people day after day. It's almost like a fire. It's an eternal fire, and we need to honor that. And this movie is a way to honor that. And that was, you know, it's so nice that so many people are here. It just means a lot. It means that the story is alive, and it means that the women in Iran are doing something that is being acknowledged around the globe, and that with whatever way we can, we support it. As you guys watching, we guys doing, and we guys creating more things until something moves. I think that's all that we can do. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think I want to share a very personal reason for myself to tell this story, because besides the obvious that, of course, telling this story in this repetition of history right now is important, but I think for myself, as Mahshid, playing this conservative, reserved, devout girl who is somehow the opposite of who I am, I think for me it was a big challenge. I think at the first day of shooting, I was a little bit angry with Eran. I was like, why did you put me into this? But I think that was exactly what I needed, because I needed to put my rage away from this religion and whatever the propaganda has turned this religion into, and try to understand a woman who is intellectual, but he has her own beliefs, doesn't try to pressure on anybody else, and she's also a victim of this propaganda. And I think for me, personally, telling the story was healing, to befriend our friends who have other beliefs than us.
Beautiful. Thank you. And with that, we'd love to take some questions from the audience. We have a microphone here that we will pass around.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say Toda Rabba, Toda Rabba. Thank you, and merci kheli mamnun shoma for showing this so accurately and respectfully. exactly opposite of Hollywood, which often they don't say the story. So thank you for that. So I'm going to ask one. I'm going to make it really short because I'm sure everyone has time. I want to say, do you have a plan for sequel for this important report for those five students? What happened to them?
Good question. I don't know. I can't really answer that because, of course, you always think, well, yes, yeah, okay. No, it's interesting because Azar,
A TV series.
a TV series, yeah. I have so much trouble in my life. Why should I have one more? It's no, what happened to to these girls are all real girls, of course, with not the real names, and Azar has I would say, not a complex relationship, but, some stayed in touch, some didn't. And I guess you always wonder, of course, there is a sequel here in the sense that, 20 years later or even 30 years later, these guys, I see the sequel actually in Azar. Yesterday I was as I was saying, I was at the Smithsonian and there were a lot of Iranians and a lot of them were actually related to Azar, like I'm her sister-in-law, which I thought, oh my God, and she loved the movie. So there's, of course, I think that really the Iranian diaspora is so widespread and so complex and so ambitious, political, very emotional. And it's certainly a world to be explored. But I have so many stories I want to tell, so I'm not sure I'll reach this one. But, who knows? You never know.
Pass it on.
Yeah. It's interesting because Golshifteh Farahani, for example, she left in 2008. I don't know if you know the story, but she was in a movie called Body of Lies, Ridley Scott, and she played a Jordanian, and she had a love affair with DiCaprio. And, of course, it led to a scene in bed. And, of course, when she came back to Iran, she was told, hey, sister, this doesn't work. And she wouldn't take it, and she just left and never went back. And, following, of course, some really brutal times. And she never made a film in Farsi, never, since she left. And she was already in one movie of mine, Shelter, a few years ago. And when I called her about this one, she said yes. But when we met again, when we actually met on the set, she said, I can't believe this. I was sure you're never going to be able to make this film. That's why I said yes. So, but with her, I have to say, it was interesting because she had all these hesitations, and we had a reading, which was on Zoom, which is quite rare, and it was a 3-hour session. At the end, she was crying, and that's when I knew that A, the script works, and B, that she's going to do it. And I can add one quick story. No, just when I first.
One. You've used your stories up.
When I first met Azar and Nafisi, we were talking about, who can play you, and she suggested Angelina Jolie. Had I not had these silly principles, to cast only Iranians, but yeah, it was an interesting idea, but no. Exactly, yeah.
We had a question up there, and then we'll take one down here.
Thank you so much, Eran. I also think you did a great job in capturing it. So I had a question for three of you. First of all, I wanted to see, not only it's a very good capturing of Iran. I'm old enough to have seen at least some of those years. It's also a very good capturing of the book. What was your relationship with Azar throughout this process in terms of, did she ever come to set? How did she feel about it? And also for the actors, a question sort of related to that is that, how did it feel being, directed by someone who, didn't speak the language? So I'm sure there were sort of some challenges there. You seem to have had a sort of great experience out of it. So, what were some of the challenges and stories, I guess?
Well, Azar, when we first met, me and Marjorie David, who was my writer in American, we set some guidelines just about her fears, but nothing beyond that. And then when she read, I think it was maybe the third draft that I felt is good enough to show her, she sent me a very brief note saying, thank you for understanding my book. And that was it. She visited the set 1.5 days. She's actually in the kind of flashback to the old Iran. She's coming out of the bookstore. You can see her there for a second, like, Hitchcock. But beyond that, she didn't see anything. And I'll tell you the kind of risk I took. We had a world premiere in Rome in October on a Saturday night, big event. All our ladies and guys came for the biggest red carpet in Europe. And Azar did not see the movie. So I said to her, listen, fly in a day earlier, and I'll show you the movie in a private theater. And that's what happened. She arrived on her own. I was sitting in the back. I think it was an amazing method for diet because I just lost all my weight during that screening. And I was really nervous, I have to say, because I felt, okay, if she doesn't love the movie, what are we going to do? But luckily, she got up, she hugged me, she kissed me, she loved it. The next day, she saw it again with the girls who actually also saw it for the first time in Rome. And I think the feeling was that, we did something together here, and it was... but respecting books, it's a complex thing. I've done already a couple of those, and at the end of the day, you're rewriting something for the screen, and you have to trust your movie first of all, and you have to make sure it works without hurting the book too much. And yet, if you go back to the book, you'll see how far it actually goes, and yet it does remain loyal in essence, I think, which I feel, why ruin something that worked already once? So. And, well, the girls will answer now, but, for me, bringing together these girls was almost like a workshop to a certain degree. And yet the way I work with actors throughout my life is juggling between... I had two mentors in England way back before the Iranian Revolution, actually, that far back, when I went to film school. And one said, you must go with every character into her history and her family and her psychology and her emotions and everything. You must be able to answer everything. And I had another guy, was a Scottish director, Bill Douglas, bless his soul, who said, tell them nothing. Just position them in the frame, and the camera and the atmosphere and their body and their look, if they understand what they're doing, it will do the job. And I think throughout my life I've been juggling between these two approaches because, at the end of the day, the big challenge is to do the right casting. Once you've cast the right people to play the right roles, I think you have to be really bad not to go wrong. And yet you have to stick with it, because I think the one thing about directing actors, specifically beyond, all the noise of all the departments and all the demands and all the expectations, is just being there for them and listening to them and looking at them. And whether it's up front or whether it's through a monitor, it's really about caring, I think. And it's once you care, and once you want to protect them in the sense that you want to protect yourself, but you want to protect them and their characters, then you just have to keep, your body heat and your energy to just stick with it every day for a long period of time.
Let's take one last question over here.
Okay, first, Eran, thank you for making the film, and it's particularly important today, given the fact that we in America are now also experiencing book banning, including Anne Frank. I wonder whether I imagine the film has not been shown in Iran, and...
Probably yes, but I don't know of it.
You don't know. But has there been any backlash in terms of people who have seen the film in any other countries, that you're exaggerating the restrictions that are taking place?
So far, I have to say no. I think there's a point in your life when, being Israeli these days, of course, you always expect possibly a Palestinian demonstration outside the cinema. There's all sorts of things you can expect. But I don't know. The film was so well received so far, and it kind of speaks for itself. Now, I know from Azar and from other Iranians that, that there's a lot of activity on probably Telegram and X, and of course, there's a lot of bots working pretty hard, I think, in Iran to send, horrible messages to Azar. How could you collaborate with an Israeli Mossad agent to make this film? It's, I I don't know. I think at the end there's a lot of noise out there, but I think when you're trying to make something real, you're always going to win. That's my point of view. A little bit naive, but I would say so far so good. No real backlash. But it's maybe it's yet it's yet to come. The film has only been out there for a very short period, and it's only now starting its life, coming out in cinemas all over Europe soon, and here I don't know yet, but hopefully it will come also soon. Girls.
The question was also to
Yes.
the two of you. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
I wanted
Go
to
on.
add something about your question about how he directed us, although some of the scenes were in Farsi. This man is very intelligent and musically tuned. So even when sometimes we would just switch a word, he would say cut. And he was like, what did you say? I was like, have you memorized the melody of each word that should be said? And so we had to make sure that if we want to change something, that we communicated with him beforehand, because he just knew the script forward and backwards. And again, with his obsessive research and all, I mean, it's a good thing. It's a compliment. It's great. It's a great thing.
Yes. Well, I have to say that, we wrote the script in English, obviously. The book was also written in English, by the way. And when I had it translated, and we had the first reading, or maybe I think the first reading, and especially Goldschmidt was saying, what? Well, what is this? Who translated this? I said, well, what do you mean? The best translator I could find in Europe? No, nobody speaks like this. They don't understand characters. So we actually had a lot of work to do with the Farsi, because Farsi is a very poetic, rich language that has a history, and also has a modern history in terms of what people say, what kind of things are said. It's sometimes amazing to realize that some things are simply not said because of culture, because of history. I was, of course I had a young assistant kind of at my ear to really follow up on big mistakes. And I also found mistakes in the editing room, which, in these days, not with AI, it's easy to fix things. My biggest fear was other mistakes, because I'll give you a small example, which is things lost in translation. In the trial of Gatsby, when the prosecutor says, the only interesting character in this book is Mr. Wilson, who killed Gatsby, and that remained in the movie. And I think literally when we were about to lock the film, I woke up one night literally sweating in the middle of the night. So I said, Mr. Wilson didn't kill Gatsby. I double-checked the book, of course, and I said, oh, my God. Just imagine Azar Nafisi in the audience seeing that, and other people who know Gatsby. So I fixed it, easily. But that's one of the places where you really have to be careful with, things that are written in English, go into Farsi, are shot. Nobody notices, what exactly is said in terms of details. But beyond that, it's really, I think, the only thing I can say is that Azar herself is probably a very good judge of the movie in terms of authenticity of both language and place, because she's probably, from the people that I knew around me, the only one who actually lived in Tehran in those years. And I think she was shocked in a good sense. And yet, we always have to remember that Star Wars was not really shot in the,
In a galaxy far, far away.
we know how to make movies. There's a lot of ways that you can do nice tricks and make people believe that you're actually on the streets of Tehran. So.
Lara, did you want to?
I mean, it was exactly what Bahar said. I remember at some point we were doing a scene over and over and over again.
More than 20 times.
For many reasons. And, at some point I think I changed something in just a sentence. And then I hear, Lara. Did you change something? Did you say something differently? It sounded differently. And we said, how is this possible? How did he hear it? This man is a genius. He hears everything. He doesn't get tired. He hears everything.
I think it's because, every film director, in essence, wanted at some point to be a composer or a musician. Wow. It's true, I think, to a lot of filmmakers. And at some point, I have a friend who went to school with me in Brazil, who's a fantastic composer himself. And, we grew up in Brazil, we learned Brazilian music. So I learned, guitar and clarinet and accordion from my mother. And I left everything. And I can't even read notes, and yet it's all music, because in the end, language is music, and you can always feel if it's off tune. And you worry less about lost words, because those can be fixed. And, in the end, you're also trusting actors who will say the right thing. They're not going to say the wrong thing, unless they hate you really badly. But it's... and also, as you could hear, Farsi, at the beginning I made films already in Arabic, and which is closer to Hebrew, of course, but still. And here we really try to be even loyal to, even if you don't know it in the film, if this character comes from a certain region in Iran, then the accent should be respected in that sense. And it was, I don't know, there's so many details in this film that could be interesting one day, just to go through the small details that are...
Much, much more to discuss. I know, I'm sorry, but we're unfortunately out of time. I do want to say that, of course, I hope that this is the beginning of the life of this film, and I hope that that everybody who read the book sees the movie, and everybody who read the book should bring a friend who didn't read the book to make sure that they go and see the movie too.
If that friend gets a free ticket, could be a...
It's a good move.
It's a good move, yeah.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We hope to see you at other screenings soon. Have a good night.
Thank you very much.